Hello, this is Myra Elaine on the Buying Space channel. Today I am reading from the Torah, from Exodus, from Yithro, which is section 7, but in chapter, excuse me, not 7, 17, in chapter 18, starting in verse 1. And Yithro is another section of the Torah, and I must say that here it has, this is the Hebrew on this side, and this is the English translated from the Hebrew on this side, and they have Yithro here, but in verse 1, the gentleman's name, who is Yithro, is spelled Jithro, but it's Yithro. So a little linguistic humor there. And starting in verse 1, and Yithro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard that what God had done for Moses and for Israel, his people, and the Lord had brought forth Israel out of Egypt. Then took Yithro, the father-in-law of Moses, Zipporah, the wife of Moses, after he had sent her back, her two sons, of whom one was named Jerusham, for he had said, I have been a stranger in a foreign land. And the name of the other, Eleazar, for the God of my father was my help, and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. And Yithro, the father-in-law of Moses, came with his sons and his wife unto Moses, unto the wilderness, for he was encamped at the mount of God. And he said to Moses, I, thy father-in-law Yithro, am coming unto thee with thy wife, and her two sons with her. And Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, and bowed himself and kissed him, and asked each other after their welfare. And they did go to the tent. And Moses told his father-in-law all which the Lord had done unto Pharaoh and unto the Egyptians on the account of Israel, and all the hardship which had come upon them by the way, and how the Lord had delivered them. And Yithro rejoiced over the goodness which the Lord had done to Israel, that he had delivered him out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Yithro said, Blessed be the Lord, who hath delivered you out of the land of the Egyptians, and out of the hand of Pharaoh, who hath delivered the people from the underhand of the Egyptians. Now I know the Lord is great above all gods, for by this very thing wherein they sinned, presumably, was punishment brought upon them. And Yithro, the father-in-law of Moses, offered a burnt offering and sacrificed unto God. And Abram came with all the elders of Israel to eat bread with the father-in-law of Moses before God. And it came to pass on the morrow that Moses sat to judge the people. The people stood around Moses from the morning until the evening. And the father-in-law of Moses saw all that he did to the people. And he said, What is this thing that thou doest to the people? Why sittest thou alone, and all the people stand around thee from the morning until evening? And Moses said to his father-in-law, Because the people cometh to me to inquire of God. When they have a matter of dispute, they come to me, and I judge one and the other, and I make them know the statutes of God and his laws. And the father-in-law of Moses said unto him, This thing thou doest is not good. Thou wilt surely wear away, both thou and the people that are with thee, for this is the thing too heavy for thee. Thou wilt not be able to perform it alone. Now hearken unto my voice. I will give thee counsel, and may God be with thee. Be thou for the people a mediator with God, that thou mayest bring the causes to God. And thou shalt explain to him the statutes and the laws, and thou shalt make them known the way of wherewithin they must walk, and the work that they must do. Moreover, thou shalt select out of all these people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating bribes, and place these over them as officers over thousands, officers over hundreds, officers over fifties, officers over tens. Let them judge the people all the time. Let them shall be a great matter, they shall bring it unto thee. But every small matter they shall judge themselves. So shall it be easier for thee when they shall hear with thee. If thou wilt do this thing, and God commandeth thee, then wilt thou be able to endure. And also the whole of the people will come into its place of peace. Moses hearkened unto the voice of his father-in-law, and did the things he had said. And Moses chose able men out of all of Israel, and placed them at the heads over people, officers over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. And then they judged the people all the times, and difficult causes they brought to Moses, but every small cause they judged themselves. And Moses let his father-in-law depart, and he went his way to his own land. Now, Jethro was a priest in Midian. He was a worshiper of Yahweh. There is a place in the Bible where I believe it's Joshua who is reflecting on Abraham. And he says that Abraham and his father Terah, and his brother Labor all worshipped the same God. But the way it's written as God is used as the word Elohim, which is plural for God. But what people forget is not the right word. What people need to keep in mind, that the Canaanite deities were originally a pantheon. And Yahweh had a wife named Asher, and there was also the deity Baal and several other deities in this pantheon. If you read in 1st and 2nd Kings, Elijah has competitions or battles with the priests of these other deities from the Canaanites, particularly Baal. So the culture that Abraham grew up in had a pantheon of deities, not just Yahweh. But Moses established that Yahweh was the one true God. And the Midianites, see, there's a group of people that think Yahweh was invented by the Midianites. The Midianites were descended of Midian, who were descendants of Abraham as well. Abraham had at least 11 other children that are known after Isaac and Ishmael, or I should say Ishmael and Isaac, because Ishmael was the oldest. But he had a second wife after Sarah died. I believe her name was Kedar, and she bore him a son named Midian, and Midian was the forefather of the Midianites. And Abraham worshipped Yahweh. There is a group, or was a group, of German intellectuals and some American intellectuals who decided that God was invented by the Midianites. But Midian's father, Abraham, worshipped Yahweh. His brother worshipped Yahweh, and his father worshipped Yahweh. So even in pre-Canaanite society, there is proof of the existence of Yahweh. Now, prior to that, he was called El, and the pantheon of deities were Elohim. So I think that intellectuals need to read the Bible, because it clearly talks about Abraham's worshiping Yahweh way back in Genesis 12. So we need to get that just out of the way. So all the descendants of Abraham would have, for the most part, if they stayed in the family religion, would have worshipped Yahweh. So Yithro here, who is a Midianite priest, would have spoken to Moses the 40 years Moses lived with him and Midian, about Yahweh. Moses would have worshipped Yahweh. Moses was raised in an Egyptian household. He did not know probably that much about Yahweh. He probably knew more about Ra or Set, or the myriad of Egyptian deities. I don't know specifically what deities he would have worshipped. He might have worshipped more than one, because he was Pharaoh's daughter's adoptive son. And I don't know at what point he found out he was Jewish, that he was of Jacob, of Israel. But when he left and went to the land of Midian and lived with the Midianite people, they would have also worshipped Yahweh. So anyway, the German intellectuals and American intellectuals think that Yithro, the Midianite, started the worship of Yahweh. And it was Abraham and the generation, at least one generation before Abraham, that focused on Yahweh being the one true God. So there is only one true God, and it's Yahweh. You call him God today. If you look in the Old Testament and you see the word Lord, Lord, and you see it capitalized, that original translation is Yahweh, not God, not El, not Elohim. Although some El and Elohim are mentioned in the Bible, but if it says Lord in capital letters, that is Yahweh. And Yahweh was not invented by the Midianites. They existed long before the Midianites, at least 4 generations, if not before. And God has always existed. Just because we have language changes where he has different labels doesn't mean that God is not God. And Yahweh might not be etched in stone from 5,000 years ago, but God has always been God. I heard a story where there was a missionary in China, and they took this metal bathtub, and they were baptizing the Chinese people that they had converted. And they baptized this woman, and they mentioned the name God. And I guess in Chinese, God might not be God. The word God might be some other word. But they told this woman, and she got real quiet, and she looked real puzzled for a minute. And then she said to the missionaries, "Oh, that is his name." She knew God. She knew Jesus Christ. She knew the Holy Spirit before she knew what name he was called. So, German intellectuals, read Genesis 12, please. And those of you that look at Jews and Gentiles and the beginnings of Jews and Gentiles, I had heard somebody call Midianites Gentiles. They worshiped Yahweh. So how were they Gentiles? They were not of the bloodline of Jacob, who was named Israel by God. But They certainly married into them, but also they were children of Abraham. So how are they Gentiles? I understand how Native Americans or Native ancient people in Europe, or Asian specific people that had been scattered all over the earth before Abraham. All of those people, I understand how they're Gentiles. But how do you call Midianites who worship Yahweh Gentiles? And Midianite descendants, many of them married, obviously, into the Hebrew family, such as Zipporah, Moses' wife, was a Midianite. And the respect that Moses' father-in-law, Zipporah's father, gives to Moses, he taught Moses about Yahweh before he saw the burning bush. That's where he learned. He might have learned a little from his mother and father and brother and sister before he had to leave Egypt. We don't know how he found out. We don't know how long he had to communicate with his birth family before he had to leave Egypt and go to Midian. We don't know. We don't know if he knew anything about Yahweh before he would discovered he was Jewish. It might have been just a passing thing to know that the slaves worshipped a certain deity. But he didn't really know about Yahweh until he met Zipporah and had a Midianite priest or prophet as his father-in-law. He spent 40 years with them before he returned to Egypt, before he returned to his people. So I don't understand. This meeting was very important with his father-in-law, but his father-in-law did not go out into the wilderness and tell Moses and the Jewish people who to worship. They already had their God. Their God had already defeated the Egyptians. Their God had already been worshipped by their ancestor Abraham, who founded the Jewish and Arab nations. So how can you say that Jethro, even though much respect to Jethro for the education and mentoring he did with Moses in his earlier years, he did not found the belief in Yahweh? I don't understand how you get that. Sometimes people who are intellectuals are too smart for their own good, but it's right here in the Bible that that's not true. It's right in Genesis 12 that Abram, when he was younger, worshipped Yahweh. Generations before Moses, generations before Jethro. They were not yet born when Yahweh was worshipped. You all have a wonderful and blessed day, and be careful who you listen to out there. I'm sure these people sound convincing, but please go to your Bible and read. And don't even take my word for it. Read the Bible. And, I look at the archaeological evidence as well. I was reading the Biblical Archaeological Society newsletter and magazine when I was 12 and 13 years old. So I've always looked at the evidence as well as having faith when I had faith. I lost my faith for 41 years, but there's nothing wrong with looking at what secular society is saying about Middle Eastern history and archaeology. And more, they're finding evidence that proves the Bible to be correct. Y'all have a wonderful and blessed day.